Hi, it's Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO here in beautiful Montreal, welcoming you to another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. We're part of Fractional Pros Canada, the home for Canada's fractional community, and you can find us on Facebook. We bring you conversations about everything fractional that matters, for fractional executives and businesses from coast to coast. Think of this as your go-to spot for real talk, practical wisdom, and strategies you can actually use, all without the corporate fluff and with plenty of Canadian content. Whether you're a fractional pro or a business in our great country of Canada and beyond, this conversation is for you. Grab your espresso and let's dive in. Welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. I'm your host and fractional CMO, Robert Mendelson, here in beautiful Montreal. And joining us from all the way down the street in Vancouver is David Trent. David is an executive leader with over 30 years of technology strategy, implementation, and operating expertise. He's run and transformed large Canadian public companies, also became a CMA CPA and Accredited Board Director. Today's episode, powered by the fractionalproscanada.ca directory. Scaling a business in Canada is hard enough without the high price tag of a full-time C-suite hire. When I'm talking to CEOs, they're telling me they need high-level strategy to break through, but they don't want the overhead, the long-term risk, or the 6-month recruiting cycle. When they ask for a shortcut, I send them to the fractionalproscanada.ca directory, the curated hub for vetted high-tier fractional talent like David. Experts who step in, find the gaps, deliver ROI from day one. Better than digging through generic job boards. Savvy leaders go where the specialists are already gathered. Business leaders, find your next strategic fractional partner on the directory at fractionalproscanada.ca. David, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much, Robert. It's great to be here this morning.
So I was fascinated to learn that before you were leading billion-dollar digital transformations, you started out essentially running a digital agency out of your dorm room during the early days of Netscape and Internet Explorer 1. And you have to be of a certain age to understand even what that means. You were building e-commerce sites, doing SEO when most people didn't even know what a browser was. You were really at the bleeding edge of technology. And you look back at that Wild West era of the web. What did those early days of self-teaching and building from scratch teach you about how to approach a complex technical problem that you're still using today?
That's a great question. And yes, I I made my way through university with this digital agency. I actually created the first website for my father's family business. And, you know, what I learned was really understanding the business at its heart. How does it make money? What are the costs of running the business? Who is its target market? And how do we build something that's going to really appeal to that market and get the leads that we wanted? That's what digital marketing is lead gen. So it was really getting to the core of what the company's offering was, and then finding the creative ways to get to market. And so I'd say, and then at the time, like, you couldn't take a course that was web development, or like today you can take millions of courses on AI or databases or data and analytics. Those didn't exist. So I would regularly trek over to Indigo or one of the local bookshops and find the latest books. And, I'm a big believer in the atomic habits. So every day I would be teaching myself something new. A new programming language, a new web coding methodology. I'd stay on top of new browsers that were coming out and releases. And so I guess the two big learnings was, one, demystify the complexity, get to the heart of what the business is about. And then, of course, in technology, and really now, since the evolution of GPT to Chat GPT and these AI agents, is, as a technologist, you have to stay current all the time, because there is new product releases. Forget coming out monthly or quarterly like they used to. They come out every day. So those are the two big learnings, Robert. And of course, managing a staff of consultants. So it was an intro to management as well. And we all know that's fun.
So you're talking about staying current with the whirlwind of AI that's changing every single day. How do you stay current?
That's a great question, and my answer to that is with AI. So I've subscribed to hundreds of product releases and email subscriptions, and they all get downloaded by my AI weekly, summarized, prioritized for the clients that I choose to serve, and are served up to me in a digest that I read every Monday night. And if there's ones that are of particular interest, I go dive deep for the week and understand what's been done.
All right, I love it. Using AI to keep on top of AI. That's where it's at these days.
It
There's no
is.
better way.
It is.
You've got a phrase on your profile that caught my attention. You say business outcomes, not technology theater. And I think there's a lot of CEOs who probably feel like they're watching a high-priced performance from, either full-time CTOs they have or fractional CTOs that they're working with, where they're seeing a lot of this kind of theater, but the real results, they're wondering if they're really there. Any tips you can give that would highlight red flags that the technology is being used more as a prop than as something that's actually delivering value to the business?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that even before AI companies struggled with, like, how am I going to get this return from this technology investment? And the answer to it is there's I think in threes in terms of value from technology. And the first one is some of it is just table stakes. You have to have a computer, you have to have a phone, you have to have a network connection. And that is the table stakes of any business today, just like an office might be, or a manufacturing plant and facilities maintenance. So you have to manage the quality and the cost of those services. That's the cost layer, right? Like, just provide the basic power, compute to just run. And that needs to be managed really, really well. And your CIO or CTO, they should know that just as well as your head accountant knows your income statement and your cash flow and your balance sheet. The next pillar of value is really risk, right? So cybersecurity is a real threat to Canadian companies. The hackers are always ahead of where companies are, trying to exploit vulnerabilities, trying to phish you, trying to spoof you, trying to defraud your companies. And so you need to have some base investments in protecting yourselves, making sure that your company is not getting or falling to one of these fraudsters. And there's many different layers and many different frameworks that you can use and tools to do that. And then the third one, which is really what you're honing into, is the value pillar, which is what capabilities does this technology provide that are going to generate more revenue, are going to reduce costs, perhaps, make me more competitive in an environment. And what I always recommend, and the pattern that I've seen with that one, especially with AI today, is let's get an AI strategy, let's trial all of these various things, and we just lose track. And you end up spending money, you got resources doing things, and you really fail to see, is this agent actually delivering some sort of value to my company? So to tackle that, what I recommend, and it's one of my 5 mistakes that we can go through later that all CEOs make, is don't start with transforming everything. Pick a beachhead. We have new technology. A beachhead is in relation back to the world wars, which is you're going to go conquer one beach. And to conquer that beach, you need to pick the beach. You need to make sure that you have troops. You need to make sure that you have a supply line, and you make sure you have the timing. And you're not going to leave the beach until you've conquered the beach. So create yourself a beachhead, which is, here's how this new technology is going to enable value for my company. And every company value will be generated differently. But find it and define that new way of working with the technology, and don't move to another beach until that one's done. Now, of course, you could have several beachheads, but think in that beachhead, please, because when it comes to technology, you need to make sure that you understand the business case. You need to make sure that you understand how it's going to impact your organization. You need to understand how you're going to operate it in the future. You need to make sure that you have a technology architecture that's going to scale past the beachhead once you're done. And you need to know how that project will get delivered and changed and applied in your organization. So that beachhead is so, so important, and we can get lost in many, many details if we don't concentrate on it.
So speaking of 5 mistakes and patterns, you've worked at some of the biggest name companies, CN, Canfor, almost household names in Canada. Have you seen any of the same patterns repeatedly that hold back companies either at that end of the spectrum, the big companies, holding them back from scaling? And do you see the similar patterns even in smaller, mid-size and even small businesses? Are those 5 mistakes, and let's talk about those, are those ubiquitous across the spectrum, or are they particular more, or some of them more particular to some bigger companies, some smaller companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I would guide to is you see them all the time, and they just look a little bit different depending on the size and the nature of the company. So why don't we take some time now and go through what those patterns are?
Let's do it.
The first one is technology is IT's job. Now, in a bigger corporation, you have an IT department. In a smaller corporation, you may have IT service providers. And so I call that the strategic abdication mistake, which is it's a technology thing. I'm going to delegate it and I'm going to forget about it. But technology is then leading you. You're not leading it. So how is it differentiating your company, and what are you doing as a leader to ensure it drives the returns you're expecting? Don't delegate it, drive it. The second one is show me the savings. I talked about the cost of running technology, and certainly these AI models are increasing in their cost regularly, as are lots of IT services. So we can make the mistake of looking at our SG&A and saying, boy, technology is costing me too much. Cut it. Cut the people, cut technology services. And that's the cost only lens mistake. And that constrains our ability to leverage technology for gain. It also might create holes when it comes to risk or services that your company needs to provide. I see that no matter what size of company it is, because at the end of the day, as business owners, we're all trying to maximize profit, and we want to reduce that G&A as much as humanly possible. The third mistake, I call it the organizational afterthought mistake, which is there's this newfangled technology, whatever it might be. Let's go implement it. And oftentimes we fail to understand the impact it's going to have on the organization and the change that's going to be needed in order to leverage and get some value from that organization. And we end up with some really, really great technology that's adopted by maybe 10% of our organization or 10% of our customers. So the people stuff can wait is that afterthought mistake. Put it at the front. Before you even get that beachhead going, understand the changes you're going to have to make to your organization, to people, to roles, to structures, potentially customers or suppliers, before you dive into the technology, because the adoption in your organization and with your stakeholders is key to getting any value from it. The fourth one is a really interesting one, and it's somewhat technical, but it's super important. And I call it the "our foundation is fine" mistake. Let's just transform with AI. We hear this all the time. I mean, I literally have 5-10 calls per week where I hear, let's just transform, the foundation is fine. Maybe sometimes you don't hear foundation is fine, but as soon as you start digging, you find there's a hairball. Because with technology advancing at such a fast rate, we add one thing because it's a good idea, then we add another thing because it's a good idea, then we add one more, and then 3 years down the road, we want to change out our CRM, or our ERP needs an upgrade, or we want to apply AI. And when we go and look at it, we've got a mess of data, we've got interfaces between systems that aren't documented, and we don't have a reference to build on top of. So generally, the foundation is not fine. And the legacy constraints that I call that hairball sit there and they stew and they become really challenging. And the speed and the resilience and the readiness of your organization to adopt any technology starts to slow down. So you really need to make sure your foundation is correct. And when you're engineering the new technology, that it's built to work on top of your puzzle box, which is the architecture of your company. We see that one 9 times out of 10, every single organization. And then the fifth and final one is one that I see at all organizations. And in fact, the smaller ones are almost more guilty than the larger ones. Larger ones have boards and CEOs and CFOs with good structure, so they control, the pipeline of what's coming in and what needs to be changed most of the time, not all the time. But as an entrepreneur, I want to use every lever I have to grow my business. And so the fifth mistake is we're transforming everything. And that is the governance and discipline mistake. So your ambition completely outpaces your organization's ability to focus and really transform what's going to add value. And what you end up with instead are a whole bunch of beachheads, and none of them ever deliver. So those are the 5 mistakes that I would say I see at every single company. Bigger ones are more guilty of some, smaller ones are more guilty of others.
So that's a great list, right? And if I'm a CEO, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, David hit it on the head. Every single one, check, 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 check. Those are problems in my company right now. But David has distilled them down into like really clear objectives of what I need to do to change them. But the reality is that it's not so easy to make those changes and to get every single mistake corrected. It's kind of like, watching a hockey game on TV from the sofa, and it's easy to see the mistakes the players are making and call them out. But it's another thing for them to go and correct them in by the third period so they win the game. So where's that fine line, David, between the hope of, here's the mistakes, we need to get them fixed, and the reality of we only have so much time, we only have so much resources? Where's that line of good enough, getting to good enough so that we can move on and not spend the next, realistically, whatever it is, 2 years, 1 year, whatever the right time frame is to get all these things right before we move on?
Yeah. It's such a great question. And I'm gonna answer that in a few different ways. First off, go Habs go. But I had a lunch many years ago at a leadership retreat with a great fellow. He's written many books. Goes by the name, obviously, Jim Collins. We all know him. Good to great. And I was new in a company, and we had every single one of these mistakes. And I was overwhelmed as a leader. I was going, how am I going to tackle this? And Jim and I talked through everything that I was seeing in the company. And he said one really important thing to me in sort of closing and wrapping up. He's like, you can choose which ones of these you're going to tackle. But if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. So the first message is relentless focus. Sure. If all 5 are alive and well and causing problems, you're not going to fix all 5 at once. What's the most important one? And then the second, and then the third. Let's get those focused on first. And then back to the sort of business results, not technology theater. What I love about fractional work, Robert, is some would call it consulting. I don't call it consulting. It is a leader coming in to work side by side with your organization to actually help fix the mistakes. It's not the delivery of a report in the form of a PowerPoint or a PDF file. It's hands in, sleeves rolled up. We're going to tackle this and tackle it as part of your leadership team.
So that's a really important distinction. And there's a lot of confusion out there between the word consultant and fractional, and they mean different things to different people. And there, I would say there are people in the Fractional Pros Canada community who call themselves consultants, but really they are fractionals. So at some level they're interchangeable, but at other levels, the way you describe the roles of whether they're called a consultant or a fractional are doing is really what matters at the end of the day.
That's right. That's right.
So speaking of fractionals, there's another kind of two schools of thought. And one is that CEOs may think they need a specialist. They want a fractional who has deep expertise in one particular area. That fractional has done this for decades and is a real expert in this area. And the other side of the spectrum is a fractional who has more of a generalist background and is more kind of like a Swiss Army CXO. And I fall into the second camp, and I think you do as well. And you argue that the Swiss Army CXO is much more valuable for a CEO to hire than somebody who's just gotten really good at one thing. Talk to us about supporting that argument. If you're in front of a CEO and you're presenting and they like what they see, and then they ask about your background and they hear you've been around the block, so to speak. How do you, and they say, well, I'm looking for somebody who's really an expert in what I do and what my business does. How do you defend that?
So how do I defend the sort of the broader CXO? Yeah. So first off, everything depends on the client, right? It is what's going to be valuable for the client and for their company, and what do they really need. I've had clients where what they really need is a very experienced technology leader to go in and diagnose what's going on in their organization technically and come and help change it, right? For whether it's, executing on some M&A, whether it's cost savings, whether it's applying some AI models, it's really somebody that has the technical chops to do it. But then I go into other clients and sometimes we start the conversation with technology. And then within half an hour, what comes to light is perhaps there's problems in their supply chain, or perhaps there's problems in their operations, or perhaps there's problems with marketing. And to have somebody that's had the experience in sitting in many CXO seats and executive seats, to not just know the one path, but know a few of the lanes and what good looks like. Because at the end, for some clients, you can generate tremendous amounts of value by coming in and having a broader set of lanes than one specific. Now, it really depends kind of client to client. I've had ones that have said, hey, David, I just want to apply AI to my supply chain. And you come in and you understand, well, hold on. I mean, yes, but first off, it might not just be AI that we need to do here. And secondly, let's look at your supply chain. Okay, you actually have a supply chain challenge here in your business. Yes, we can enable some change with technology, but it's actually rethinking your whole supply chain, how it interacts with operations, and how you deliver it to your customers. So there's a conversation that starts with technology, but it becomes much, much broader.
I think there's a mistake a lot of businesses are making now. They are looking at AI, they're reading about how it's making things more efficient, automated workflows, and they immediately start looking at, all right, let's list out all the workflows we have the man hours that it's taking, and let's prioritize by how much time we can save, and let's start automating all of those without first auditing those processes and see if they're actually good processes. Because the worst thing you can do is automate a bad process and just ramp up how fast the bad process can execute on, and now you've just dug your hole deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. And as it relates to automation and productivity, as we all start trying to gain some value with I think for the audience here, I think what's important to remember is we've been automating things for decades with technology. And we can do that with many, many different tools. Most of what we call AI today are language models, they're inference models. So you have to ask yourself, if the AI, if the LLM updates, and I ask it the same question or give it the same prompt tomorrow as I did today, and it comes out with a different answer, am I okay with that in my workflow? Number one. Number two, if we get AI to be doing all of these repeatable tasks, you're burning up credits. And quite often you can do, I'll call it the Ford Model T or the Toyota Tacoma technology application, which is just good, reliable, low-tech approach to gaining that automation and productivity gain for your company. It doesn't have to be AI.
I think a challenge a lot of leaders face as well is they know they need to bring in an expert, a CTO, CIO, somebody who can help them. They're thinking to themselves, I'm behind on AI and digital, but they have this reticence. They don't want to get ripped off, right? There's a lot of people selling a lot of things out there right now, a lot of solutions. What's a good question or two that a leader can ask a prospective, fractional CTO, CIO, to get a sense of whether this person really knows what they're talking about, or if, again, it's just a bunch of theater in front of them?
Yeah. So I would start with two fundamental questions. The first one would be relating to, this is the client speaking, my business. Okay, you understand my business. I'm going to say I'm behind with digital and AI. Tell me, what would you prioritize for me to focus on? And pay attention to how sharp that answer is. Does the perspective fractional, do they know about your company? Do they know about your industry? Do they know broadly the impacts on your revenue, on your customers and your suppliers and your costs? Do they show acumen with respect to what your business is all about? So that's question number one. Question number two would be, tell me one or two cases where you have gone in and made impactful and material gain with respect to business. And certainly when it comes to providers, I always ask for references and testimonials. Show me that you've done this. Doesn't have to be the exact case, of course, because every case is different. But one, do you understand my business? And two, show me that you have done this before and prove it to me.
Going back to your question one, sometimes, I find myself in situations where I'm asked that question by a CEO or a founder, and I'm asked, what would you prioritize? What would you start with? And I feel like I don't have enough information to answer that question quite yet. There's a certain amount of intelligence I can gather about the company that's publicly available, scraping, LinkedIn, Apollo, all those great things, AI. But at the end of the day, if they're saying to me, all right, what would your plan be for the first 90 days or 120 days, or what would you prioritize? Sometimes I find the answer is, I don't think I can really answer that yet. I need more information. And maybe I'm going to tell them what information I need, ask them to give it to me, and then in real time, I can then answer the question.
Yeah.
Does that happen to you? Is that something that is common, or do you typically gather enough information magically to have all the answers?
The answer to that is, it depends. Sometimes it is just please come in and help me create the 90-day plan. And we agree, first 30 days is going to be really defining what the problem set is, right? Like, what are we actually trying to do? And then we get going. So sometimes it's, you're going to be a fractional, come in, do this, let's set up a 90-day plan, let's go. Other times, maybe they're not ready for fractional, they just need some focus. And so we don't agree on the next 90 days, we agree on the next 30 days, which is, let's just call it discovery. Let's do a limited scope of work, 1 month, and come in and really dig underneath that first layer of problems, because we don't want to top the wave, right? We want to get right in and swim. So sometimes we need to do a fair bit of upfront work, depending on the complexity of the organization and the vagueness of the ask, to really understand what's at the heart of what needs to be done.
Let's talk about implementation fatigue. And there's a lot of organizations who have lived through various implementations of new technology solutions. ERPs is a very, very common one. So what happens now when, David gets engaged and after 90 days, the plan is put together and it's clear that, we need to roll out some AI in these different areas, for example, and you have a team that is suffering from implementation rollout PTSD, shall we call it? And how do you mitigate that? What do you do differently this time to get them on your side and be open to adopting this?
Yeah, it's a problem that every organization faces, right? We want to change, we see value. As leaders, we always want things to go faster, cost less, and drive more value, right? I mean, that's at the heart, that's what we always want. The reality is that poor customer service clerk or supply chain planner or sales manager has had 15 things hit them all at once. And they might not be technology. It could be changes in customer base, changes in product, M&A fatigue. That's where in the model and the 5 mistakes, when I talk about the people afterthought, is before we go in and even start a project, forget implementing, just starting it, we look at the workforce. What are they doing today? How many changes have they had in the last 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? Are they going to actually be able to absorb this amount of change? And this amount will vary depending on what you're trying to do. And in parallel to actually working on the technology and getting it ready, we're also going to work on getting the organization change ready. And what do we look for? Well, the first nugget I like to call game changers, which is not everybody in the organization needs to be a hooray, hooray, let's adopt this change. But we need to have people that are in the operation or in the organization that are going to be affected by this change that get it. And when I say they get it, it's more than just they get the technology and they get the impact. They're also the type of individual that has a good network in the company. They can have the coffee talks or the water cooler talks. They can be an advocate for the change within the organization that is going to be getting it. And we use those game changers throughout the implementation to help get the organization ready and to help drive that adoption. So really, we have to look at the amount of change, and not just technology change, but all change that's in an organization, to be careful. Because sometimes we have a great idea, but your organization's just burnt out. It's just not going to make it. And that's a risk, because you could spend an awful lot of money and end up with a fancy widget sitting in the garage collecting dust. You can also try to apply change into an organization that's going to just put up their boots and kick it right out of the company. And so you need those game changers that are on the cusp of business and technology implementation and can really help steward it and shepherd it through the organization. That's the people readiness part. And there's lots of assessments you can do on the things that matter when it comes to implementations like this. We have to look for people that are adaptable. We have to look for people that are curious. We have to look for people that are emotionally intelligent, have a high EQ. And those are the ones that are going to be able to affect change in an organization. And sometimes we don't find those. And before we go about any implementation, we have to hire them, put them in place, transfer them from another department to make sure that we're ready.
AI, how are you using it personally right now in your business? What kind of changes is it yielding for you in terms of efficiency, and how all in are you on AI right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would have to say, I'm almost going back to your first question about me learning how to build a digital agency on Internet Explorer 1. It almost feels the same today, which is there are so many different use cases. In my business, I have to use it for business development. So I have agents that help me with BD, whether that's content creation, lead generation, all of those good things. They bring it up to the point of a personal conversation because AI is not going to have a personal conversation with a client. We use it for research on a company, whether you're in the company and dealing with their information or just some generic research. We use a lot for research. AI can do the work of what dozens of analysts used to be able to do. I love it as a technologist and using the frameworks that I've had experience with and the intellectual property that I have. I've trained up agents on all of my frameworks and my IP. So if I'm going in to do an assessment of supply chain or lead gen or ERP, I'm able to have an agent help me with the actual implementation so that the staffing counts and the consulting costs are minimized for the client. I also mentioned, broadly, just staying up to speed. So on multiple topics, I mean, AI and technology releases is one, but world events, geopolitics, economic indicators, AI is helping me digest what is an awful lot of information out in the wild and really bring it in succinctly to what matters for my business. So I would say I am all in. I mean, I am a AI first company. If you go look at my website, yes, I wrote a lot of the content. I wasn't an English major, so it obviously helped me edit that content. But AI actually built the whole website. When it comes to lead gen, yes, do I reach out with a phone call or do I reach out with an email? You bet, because I prefer the personal approach. But everything before that, in terms of researching, information gathering, it is 100% done by AI. And then when I'm solving problems for clients, I use some traditional means, obviously, and some traditional consultants, depending on the need, but we apply AI to speed up the delivery. What's important, however, and I will emphasize this and overemphasize with any AI implementation today, is make sure you define where the human is in the loop. If you're going to send a document, if I was going to send a document to a client, even if I used AI in some way, shape, or form for its creation, I am personally reviewing it, authenticating it, and ensuring that it is accurate before I hit the send button.
100%. I say I go one step further. I don't say keep the human in the loop. I say keep the human in the lead.
Yeah, yes, exactly. We should keep the human in the leads because we humans will always lead.
You mentioned using AI to make you more efficient in the number of hours and the time it takes you to serve a client, which helps to minimize costs. I want to double click on that because there are fractionals who are saying just because I use AI to save a bunch of time, it doesn't change the outcome that I am producing as value for my client. And therefore, it doesn't matter how much time I'm spending. It's all about the outcome. And if I can achieve the same outcome in less hours for me to work, why should the value of that outcome go down in terms of dollars being charged.
Right. Well, this is the latest in terms of commercial contracting, right? Am I going to contract on an outcome versus contract on time? And my strong preference is currently to stick with time, but to just be very efficient. So my output is just higher, gains more value for the customer. Getting to commercial terms on a specific outcome can be very difficult, because quite often that outcome is affected and impacted by a number of other factors outside of the fractional's control. And I want to get the client to the outcome, but in most cases it is by leading and just being efficient with our time. And so I prefer to do that personally. It's a personal decision. Other companies are now trying to work at the outcome-based model, and what it looks like is very simple. I mean, I'm going to build this product or service for you, and it is going to generate this much value, and therefore my fee will be a percentage of this value, and we're going to drive at that. That is certainly a very performance-oriented contract, and as a fractional, I'd want to make sure that I know I'm actually going to be able to achieve those means before I sign up for such a term. But when it comes to the time and the efficiency, that's what's going to that's the return on AI. I mean, we will eventually all be using it for a variety of cases to become hyper productive. I mean, I have agents that run while I'm sleeping every day, and I get up in the morning and they've done their work. The beauty of agents, and for that matter, any automated technology, is it runs 24/7. It doesn't need a vacation. It doesn't need a break and a coffee or lunch. It just runs. And as long as the cost of doing that is less than employing a person to do it, then we should think about using technology for it.
All right, David, let's wrap it up with the final question. If you could put one message on a billboard for millions of fractionals and business leaders to see as they drive by it every day in the highway of life, what would that one message be?
Robert, I'm a proud Canadian, and my company focuses entirely on the Canadian market. And for all leaders, fractional and otherwise, I think we as a country need to focus on being globally competitive and more aggressive in how we apply technology for our business gains. So let's get at it. Let's not make the 5 mistakes, and let's improve the economic prospects for our country.
I love it. I thought for a minute there you're going to say, put on the billboard, "Go Habs, go." And for reference, we are recording this in the middle of May when the Habs are smack dab in the middle of the playoffs. So by the time this airs, hopefully they will be the Stanley Cup champions, and this will have even greater meaning. All right, David, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us here today on the Fractional Pros Canada podcast.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you're a fractional professional based in Canada, we'd love to have you join us in the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook group, the home for Canada's fractional community. It's where Canadian fractional executives connect, share insights, and help each other succeed. Until next time, I'm Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO. May your impact be full-time, even if your hours are fractional.